Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I will be reviewing Dungeons and Dragons Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft from Wizards of the Coast. Is this a must-own supplement for those out there looking for horror-infused 5e D&D? Or would you be better served plunging a stake through this book, covering it in garlic, and burying it somewhere never to be found again? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I'm going to be reviewing D&D Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft in just a moment. But first, I do want to let you know there is still time for you to get into the running to win my copy of the alternate art edition of the book. All you got to do is check out my first look video, and I will tell you how you can get into the running. I am going to send this out to a winner anywhere around the world where I can send something from the United States. Easy peasy. So if you're able to watch videos on YouTube, you're probably going to be able to get into the running to win the book. I'm going to announce the winner on the May 17th edition of my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch. So if you get in the running, be sure to tune in. All right, without further ado, I am reviewing Dungeons and Dragons Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft from Wizards of the Coast. This 256-page hardcover is arriving in stores on May 18th. It is going to carry an MSRP of $49.95. When I did my first look video, I promised I would have a review of the book out before this was available in stores, and here it is. So, want to mention that the fine folks over at Wizards of the Coast were kind enough to send me this review copy of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other compensation for me to share my thoughts about this book with you. These days, it's very important that you know that. Also, right off the bat, going to point out, I think this is going to be, if not the most divisive, one of the most divisive 5e game books to date. And I will explain why in just a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay up here. So I'm going to stay picture in picture. So I am going to be cutting off a little bit of the book as we take a look. I am not going to look at every page either. But first of all, I do want to give credit where credit is due. All of these fine folks are behind Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. So I have had also some of the commenters on the first look video asking if I can take a closer look at some of the artwork that's contained in the book. I will pause from time to time for you to get a better look at some of the art. The artwork throughout is very, very well done. It is very uniform as well. There's no like images where it's like, wow, that's awesome. And then two or three are kind of like, what? Why did they put that in here? So really, really nice, even presentation for the artwork as well. So we get a little section talking about using the book, explaining what are the chapters. I got to point out, this is a dungeon master facing book for the most part. There are only about 30 pages that are really player facing, and it's character creation, different backgrounds, dark gifts, and things like that. So we also get some information about like 7 bullet points about Ravenloft and the Land of Mists. Because I understand a lot of people have a misconception that Ravenloft is where Castle Strahd is located, which it is, but that's Barovia. Barovia is the region. Ravenloft is kind of an overarching setting. It's an overarching horror setting. So we have all these different, what are known as domains of dread, and these mysterious mists separate them. And there are mist walkers. So there are individuals who can travel between the various different settings or various different planes, I guess we could say as well. So we get into the character creation. There's discussion about lineages and how these are haunted heroes. You can have these dark gifts as well. There's some cool stuff in here. Horror trinkets, which is essentially just a big random table for you to roll on. There's some discussion about preparing to be scared. Something I will talk about at the end when I share my final thoughts and give this a review score is that there is a presentation of how you should go about running horror games, and I completely disagree with it. And I will talk about that in a little bit of length. I'm not going to really rehash everything. I'm going to try to make this review relatively quick. Keeping in mind, if this is your first time checking out any videos on the Gaming Gang channel, I don't script any of my reviews, so this is kind of stream of consciousness. So, all right, so you can play a Damn Fear. You can play a, what is Hexborn, is it? Hexblood. You can also play a Reborn, who is kind of along the lines of a zombie, but they're not a zombie, of course, because you still have your free will. You still have your intelligence. One of the cool things are the dark gifts, like special abilities that your character might have. So there are a few different ones as well. We've got different backgrounds. And then we have, these are the horror trinkets I was talking about as well. So like I said, there's about 30 pages that are player facing. So as a player, I would not recommend picking up this book because the vast amount of information in here is not for you. It is for the dungeon master. And I'm one of those kind of people where if there's a lot of like game master facing material in a book and I were a player, I wouldn't want to have that book because I would be so tempted to read that and it'll probably ruin a lot of the surprises. Next, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about these domains of dread. And there's discussion how to create your own. And each of the domains has a dark lord who is, I guess, a reflection of that domain, that setting, that region. And the horror within reflects the dark lord as well. So there's some bullet points about how to create your own dark lords. So I thought that was fairly interesting. Once again, it's a lot of random tables. There are a bunch of random tables. And as someone who is a fan of old school role-playing games, random tables don't bother me if they're used more as a way to inspire creativity as opposed to being there as a crutch. So some of the random tables in here are just, I don't feel that they're really adding anything to the mix. I would have rather seen some bullet points, maybe a couple, 2-3 sentences, a paragraph devoted to something where it's like, oh, well, and of course, obviously, you don't have to roll dice. You can choose whatever you want. But still, so we have information about creating the domain. And then we get into the genres, the various different genres. We get a couple of pages devoted to each of the genres. Once again, random tables if you want to randomly roll up what like the big bad is or the torments or the plots that you could have as well. And we've got a few different. We've got body horror, cosmic horror, dark fantasy, got gothic. Well, we got folk, ghost stories. There's our gothic horror, which is essentially Curse of Strahd. Curse of Strahd is gothic horror. We got some that don't actually get the 2 pages, you just get a few paragraphs as well. And then we're going to move into the actual domains of Ravenloft. This breaks down into essentially a gazetteer. So each of these domains, and we're not going to look at every single one, there are 17. Each of the domains do have a genre or genres of horror that are the focus. And they'll range anywhere from 4 to 8 pages in length. And unfortunately, we find the plus and minus of what we see in most gazetteers. We get enough information to actually get your creative juices flowing, but not enough actual gameable material within. One aspect of these domains that is no doubt going to upset buyers of this book, there are no stat blocks for any of these Dark Lords. There are very few stat blocks at all outside of the bestiary. And I kind of get the impression that this is a design theme we're going to see more of with Dungeons and Dragons moving on, because I honestly think that we're going to start seeing a different direction, a different tone with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I think there is new leadership that's coming on board. Now, once again, this is just my gut feeling. So, but I do have the feeling, because this book reads differently than other past source books, adventure books. And now I'm not necessarily saying that's bad, but I am saying that I do see a bit of a change in direction and philosophy for Dungeons and Dragons. And I think part of it is that we may see more of the heavy lifting placed on the shoulders of dungeon masters, as opposed to having everything all statted out and right there ready for you. So this is Barovia. Barovia is the land where Strahd van Zarovich resides. This is the setting that people associate with Ravenloft. It is a gothic horror setting as well. All right, something else I should point out. We'll actually take a quick peek here. I have also seen a lot of people commenting in the comment section for the first look video at how they're running Curse of Strahd, and they're like, wow, they can't wait for this book because it's really going to fill out a lot of stuff as far as Barovia, and it's really going to enhance their campaign. I got to be honest, I don't see that. The reason is because this is it as far as the information about Barovia. And then we're on to another domain of dread. So there are 6 pages devoted to Barovia, and much of that information in those 6 pages, outside of, we've got these random tables here, is essentially rehashed information from Curse of Strahd. So if someone, is looking to really boost Curse of Strahd in Barovia, I don't see this doing that. But if someone's looking to embrace Ravenloft, remember, Ravenloft is more an overarching setting as opposed to a specific place, then of course this is going to be worth taking a peek at. I have to point out, with 17 different domains of dread, there is some overlap. Some are much more original than others, in my opinion. The Carnival, I know a lot of people were really excited to know that the Carnival is included in the guide here. Not a lot of page count to it, though. 4. So once again, I don't mean to harp on it, but it's the failings of a gazetteer approach where it's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. Wow, that's pretty cool. But everything's left into the hands of the dungeon master as far as going forward. Anyway, so we've got, like I said, we got 17 of these. Some are longer than others. I think the longest is 8 pages. I will point out that I am not the most well-versed Dungeons and Dragons like historian out there, especially once we got into like 2nd edition and on. Of course, I have reviewed just about every 5th edition release, but like, you know, Ravenloft, I never played Ravenloft. I never read Ravenloft until 5th edition Curse of Strahd. I'd of course heard about it and had people who played it talk about it, but I understand that some of the background, some of the lore in this book is completely different than in past incarnations of Ravenloft. That might upset people. And then again, on the other hand, some people might be like, good. I'm glad to see a change. All right. So the vast majority of the page count is devoted to the various different domains of dread. Here's a change right here with Lamortia. And this was, what was it? Victor Mordenheim? Wasn't he kind of like the Dr. Frankenstein of Ravenloft lore? Well, it's no longer Victor. It is Victra. So there has been a gender change and sexual orientation change as well. Once again, some people might dislike that. Some people might be like, oh, that's cool. Good. All right. Some cool artwork here. Next section we're going to get into is going to discuss horror adventures. See, but as I mentioned, I mean, this is still in the domains of dread section here. And then we get some other domains that just don't get much more than a few paragraphs in discussion as well. So there's a lot of domains. We do talk about like I had mentioned earlier, the Travelers in the Mist, which the player characters could easily become, where they go from setting to setting through those mists. Mist wanderers. I said mist walkers. They're mist wanderers. Sorry about that. All right. So we now get into a Dungeon Master facing section talking about horror adventures and horror content and understanding horror. And it's kind of funny. Now, as I mentioned, I have run Call of Cthulhu since it came out. 1981, I believe, is when it came out. I have run horror role-playing for decades, and I disagree with quite a bit of what they're trying to say. It kind of boils down to a discussion of that the characters should be frightened, the players shouldn't, which to me makes absolutely no sense. And they equate that to watching a horror movie, where people love watching horror movies because they know that it's just a movie and nothing can hurt them. Yes, I get that. So in the same vein, it's just a role-playing game. It's just like you're watching a movie. It's not going to hurt you. A lot of hand-wringing in this, and the funny thing I find is that there's all this discussion about, oh, don't push the envelope, which I agree. Okay. I know my players. I know what I can get away with doing and what I shouldn't try. But then again, I also am an adult and I understand what good taste is. And I'm not here to freak people out at the game table or anywhere else. And it's just kind of funny. I mean, there's discussion of the X card, and yes, I get the X card. I understand where it's coming from. But the problem is that X card is not going to stop just bad gaming, just weird concepts coming out at your game table. The X card is there to shut it down, but it doesn't prevent it from arising. What it prevents bizarreness in all different stripes from appearing at your game table is actually having a game master who, number one, understands good taste. And I am not trying to tell people that they're having wrong fun. You can do whatever you want around your game table as long as I don't have to be exposed to it. And other people who aren't comfortable with that aren't exposed to it either. But I don't know. I think in some ways there's kind of this whole, I hate using this term, but I got to use it. There's this underlying wokeness about this book that in my opinion, for anyone who is an adult, an educated adult, doesn't need to be told this. I mean, some of it just seems like it's just over the top hand wringing that just isn't needed. Because last I had heard, we had I believe there was I think it was a poll, may have been a few years ago, but there was a poll asking, how, the age and education level of people who played Dungeons and Dragons. And well over 2/3 of Dungeons and Dragons players were over the age of 18. 1/3 was, I believe, over the age of 30. So some of this stuff is just, like I said, it's woke to be woke is kind of how it comes across to me. It's not, it's just here and there throughout the book, but I do know that some people will be turned off by that. We do get an adventure, a lot of random stuff going on in this house. So here's something I find kind of interesting, and maybe I'm harping on this a little bit, but this is where I feel that there's kind of a disconnect with this book, where there's discussion of, well, okay, you want to make sure it's the player characters who are scared, not the players, and you don't want to overstep any bounds or anything like that. And then they include an adventure which features seances, which in many religions are not okay. So it's sort of like, okay, so on one hand you're like, oh, well, you don't want to offend anybody, but we're going to put an adventure in this book featuring something that could offend people based on their religion. Sort of like, okay. This adventure is very linear as well. It's pretty much a railroad, which I have to point out, horror role-playing games, the adventures tend to be linear. They tend to be kind of a railroad. It's just baked into the cake. And just because there's a railroad does not mean people will not have a good time, because there are some railroad trips that are a blast. It is when people feel that they have no say in what's going on. It's everything. It doesn't matter what you do. You're going to still end up at this scene. That's when a linear adventure becomes a problem. The adventure's okay. It's, I think it's all right. It didn't knock my socks off. It certainly is not as good, in my opinion, as some of the other starter adventures that we have seen from Wizards of the Coast, especially like in their starter sets. I think both of those adventures, of course, they're much higher page counts, but I thought they were much more creative and got the old juices flowing much easier. All right, then we've got a bestiary. We've got like 32, 33 monsters in the bestiary here. Some are cool. Some are redundant, like a loop guru. Do we really need the loop guru? It's just a werewolf. And essentially they say, well, it's a werewolf that's more virulent than a regular werewolf. Uh-huh. It's like, okay. This is pretty creepy, this one here. So we'll focus a little bit on some of this artwork. The gallows speaker. Nosferatu. All right. Like I said, we've got 32. It's like 32 or 33 entries. I forget. Zombies. I thought that's kind of cool. Where it's actually all made of zombies. Almost like a zombie golem. So, pretty cool. Like I said, I like the artwork all throughout this book. I think it was really, really nicely done. And then we have a spirit board to finish up, as we actually had the planchette to open the book. Thought that was kind of interesting. All right, so that is Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Let me swing over to the other camera, and I will share some final thoughts and give this a review score. So I mentioned that I thought that this is going to be a very divisive book. Here's why. And I've touched on it as we look through. But there are quite a few reasons I think that are going to really split the 5e community. So number one, and I think this is probably the big one, is the lack of stat blocks for the Dark Lords. And that these domains basically just break down into gazetteer entries with some interesting information, but not a ton of gameable information. Once again, because there's no stat blocks, there's you'll get random tables where it's like, oh, these are the monsters of this domain, and and it's like, oh, here, where can you find the monster? Is it in the monster manual? Is it here in this book? So I think that is going to be very, very divisive for people as far as what value they feel they get out of this book. Because I know for a fact there are going to be people who are pissed there are no stat blocks for any of the Dark Lords. It's just gonna happen. I also feel that some people are going to think, wow, there's loads of information in here. There's just tons and tons of information in this book. That is true, but the vast majority of this book is fluff. It is. You got the adventure. Okay, like I said, the adventure's all right. It's, like I said, very linear, but it's okay. It's not bad. It's not a terrible adventure. It's just not inspirational by any stretch of the imagination. You've got the bestiary as well. You've got the information about creating a domain of dread. And you've got some character creation info. The rest is fluff. I think some people will be absolutely fine with that. And I think other people will have an issue with that. This is not a cut and dried review because this book is not going to be aimed for everybody playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. As much as Wizards of the Coast may want you to believe that, as much as some other reviewers out there may want you to believe that, oh my God, this is the biggest, wrong, and best, wrong, 5th edition book out there. I saw that was kind of the headline for Polygon's review of this book. It's the biggest and best 5e book yet. Well, certainly not the biggest, because the page count is far lower than many other books. And that is something I will mention. And it's certainly not, in my opinion, the best. Now, that's subjective. Biggest is not subjective. It's called a page count, and this is not the biggest. Clocks in 256 pages, $49.95. So it's effectively $50. We are starting to see this to be about the page count for the Dungeons and Dragons supplements, whereas, and the price is not, the price is $49.95. Used to be $49.95 was for source books that clocked in over 300 pages. Something like this, give or take a couple of pages, would normally have clocked in at $39.95. So it seems like we are now settling into just about every Dungeons and Dragons book from Wizards of the Coast is going to be $50, regardless of page count. Kind of a bummer. I do want to mention that as well. The whole don't scare the players, it's the player characters who are supposed to be scared, I think is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. What is the point of playing or running a horror-themed role-playing game if at no point are the players supposed to go, oh, whoa, wow. After the game's over, oh, man, I can't believe when such and such happened. Oh, man, that was like, oh, wow. Seriously? And it's weird, too, because there's even a section talking about when you're creating your character that you should be trying to think of ways that what does your player character do when they're frightened? And once again, this plays into this whole modern theme of, and this is the way I see a lot, and I'm not picking on 5e. There are a lot of role-playing games out there that are now like this. And I think it basically comes from the players. But it's where the focus is all about the character. It's all about my character and the things my character is all about, and the adventure itself is secondary. That's why you see a lot of people out there who enjoy themselves playing an hour of just wave after wave of goblins attacking, and they're just rolling dice and they're just chopping them down, and they would do that for hour upon hour. To me, I could handle that for about 15 minutes and I'd be gone from that game table. To me, that is not role playing. But once again, that's just a quibble of mine. But yeah, there's this discussion of, like when you're creating your character, like what is your character going to do when they're frightened? But don't scare anybody. Don't scare the players. And then there's stuff in the book that's kind of creepy. As a player, running across something like that or learning about the lore of one of these domains is pretty scary. Now, of course, I can't imagine anybody actually being terrified sitting at a gaming table unless you were afraid of the other players around you. But the actual game itself, I can't see people being terrified by it. Spook people, sure. As someone who's run Call of Cthulhu for so long, that is the point of playing a horror role-playing game, is to have your players, not player characters, sit there and go, whoa, and they're like, whoa, that's cool. Wow. Whoo, man, that's creepy. I don't get it. And once again, it goes back to what I was talking about with the hand wringing about everything that seems to be far too common these days in our modern role-playing games, where rather than making it welcoming for everybody, it just seems to just make things more bland. I don't know. Anyway, so what do I think of this book? Like I said, I think it's going to be divisive. I think there are people who are going to really enjoy it. Think there are people who are going to be like, seriously? So if you are somebody who is really into Curse of Strahd and the whole concept of 5e horror, this is probably worth a pickup if you are a dungeon master. So you might personally give this like an 8 or maybe even a 9. If you have no interest in horror role-playing, no interest in running Curse of Strahd, which this really doesn't boost anyway, if you have no interest in 5e horror, you'd probably give this book maybe a 3 or a 4. Personally, I think the book is okay. I don't think it is the biggest nor best 5th edition book out there. I believe there are going to be people who are dungeon masters running Curse of Strahd who picked this up or who had plans of running Curse of Strahd and pick this up and might find themselves disappointed that there isn't a whole lot of info about Barovia and Strahd in here. Then others will like it because there's a lot in here. All in all, on a scale of 1 to 10, myself personally, and I got to point out, I am not somebody, even though I do believe the new 5th edition Curse of Strahd is a really, really well done adventure. I give this a 6.5 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10. It's okay. It's all right. I think there's far more fluff and far too little gameable material in this source book. And finally, I am going to say that I do believe that this is a direction we are going to see more from Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. We already know Hasbro wants Wizards of the Coast to release more D&D than they have annually. So we are going to start seeing a ratcheting up, I guess we'll say, of the number of releases that we will see in a given year. That does not necessarily mean that it's going to be better material as well. I don't know. Like I said, your mileage is really going to vary. This is not, to me, this is not a cut and dry review by any stretch. I can only tell you what I personally think and my use for it at the game table. All right. That is it for this time out. Do want to remind you, if you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload reviews such as this, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube Monday through Thursday nights, as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at board games, role-playing games, miniature rules, and more. All right. My name's Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for stopping by and checking out this video. And of course, as I wrap up all my videos during what's maybe no longer going to be a never-ending pandemic, I still hope all of you out there are being smart and staying safe. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, by all means, if you haven't subscribed to the Gaming Gang channel yet, click right here. If you'd like to see the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, click right up there. And if you want to trust YouTube's algorithm to give you something to watch, click right there. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and everybody please wear a mask.